My talk today is centered on two things. So the first is I'd be exploring a little bit about what SOCA or value creating education means to me, and I think by now all of you have been quite sort of familiarized with this approach to learning. It is an approach to curriculum that developed in early 20th century Japan. Also, in relation to SOCA or value creating education, I'll be exploring today through my talk education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Now, these are initiatives led by UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So, in particular, within the history of UNESCO's engagement with education for sustainable development and global citizenship, I'll engage with target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, but more about that in a bit. Overall, the premise of my work is that there is a lack of scholarly literature on values-based perspectives that can contribute to the discourse and practice of education for sustainable development and global citizenship. So this presentation has three parts. In the first part, I'll briefly explore and discuss value creating education. In the second part, I aim to introduce and situate my work in the field of education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And finally, in the last section, I'll share some of the proposals from my recent work on value creating global citizenship education. So, to begin, in the first part of this presentation, let me provide a brief introduction to SOCA or value creating education. SOCA or value creation is the capacity to find meaning, to enhance one's own existence and contribute to the well-being of others under any circumstance. So this is a definition by Dr. Ikeda, who is, I think everyone knows of his work by now. He is an educator. And he is, of course, also the president of the lay Buddhist organization, the Soka Gakkai International. So this is a definition of SOCA or value creating education, SOCA or value creation as a concept. Now, if we look at SOCA or value creating education, it therefore can be defined as a learner-centered approach that is focused on the health, well-being, and happiness of each student. Happiness, has a very specific understanding in the sort of field of SOCA studies. Happiness is described as the ability to lead a contributive life for the welfare of self and others. So, for example, within the SOCA schools and universities, which are secular institutions founded by Dr. Ikeda, a key emphasis within learning across all these schools and universities is to enhance students' relationships in education, to broaden an understanding of other people and cultures. So this, of course, includes the SOCA University of America, and I think you heard from Dr. Jay Heffron yesterday from SUA. SUA, as you might know, is a liberal arts college in California. So a key feature of SOCA University is to provide students with a study abroad experience, which is included in tuition, so that every undergraduate spends a semester living in and learning about another culture. So another example is the SOCA schools in Japan, and these schools aim to promote friendships among the students as a key goal. So what I find, and what many scholars find as well, is that within the SOCA schools and in universities, we often find expressed in the universities or the institution's mission statement the aim to develop relationships and a sense of purpose within the students to contribute to the wider world as global citizens. It has been argued that the philosophy that undergirds the notion of relationship building in Ikeda's proposals stems from the Buddhist view of interdependence. And Ikeda explicitly draws a link between the Buddhist view of interdependence and his proposals on education for global citizenship. In a lecture delivered at the Teachers College in Columbia University in 1996, he alludes to this concept of dependent origination. As he explains elsewhere, dependent origination or pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit is the view that all beings and phenomena exist or occur in relation to other beings or phenomena. Everything is linked to an intricate web of causation and connection, and nothing, whether in the realm of human affairs or of natural phenomena, can exist or occur solely of its own accord. So I'll give you a minute to just sort of digest that concept of dependent origination. So so there is this ontological understanding of Soka or value creation informed by the Buddhist view of interdependence of all life. This philosophy has enthused several people across, Soka institutions worldwide to take constructive change within their local communities. Here are now, I'll move on very specifically to key lessons for Soka studies in education, which I think are relevant to the ongoing and future efforts in this field of studies beyond Soka schools and Soka universities to mainstream education worldwide. What are some of the key lessons for this field of inquiry, including, of course, for this new center and for the inspiring students here. I hope that we can have some discussions based on some of these thoughts that I have. But I'm going to share a little bit first on the importance of comparative and contextual studies. But before that, I'd like to share a little bit from my own personal journey in this field. So I grew up in the city of Kolkata in India. And as an undergrad student at the University of Delhi, I became interested in the educational ideas of the Soka thinkers. As a student, I was disillusioned by the education that I had experienced in India. And this was in spite of the fact that, my school and university were highly reputed institutions. I felt that the education imparted was often divorced from the students' lived experiences of their daily lives. And so I decided to study at Soka University in Japan. And I know we have two colleagues from SUJ today. So I studied at Soka University in Japan, founded by Dr. Ikeda. And in my first year, I studied Japanese proficiency and then acquired my master's or graduate degree in education. So when I entered Soka University, I really wanted to focus solely on Mr. Makiguchi's educational pedagogy. So Mr. Makiguchi is the sort of the progenitor and the founder of the Soka, field in a sense. So I really wanted to just focus on his educational pedagogy and the ideas of Dr. Ikeda. However, my Shidokyoju, or my master supervisor, was interested in my doing a comparative study, that extended beyond his expertise on Makiguchi and Japan. He was already doing that for a while. He wanted now for me to bring in my sort of experience, from the Indian education. And so consequently, my dissertation, instead of focusing only on Makiguchi, became a comparative study of Makiguchi and the Indian political leader, his contemporary, Mahatma Gandhi. I think Gandhi is, of course, needs no introduction. So then I did my doctoral work, after I finished my studies in Japan. I then went on to UK to do my PhD in a comparative study of Makiguchi and Gandhi and Ikeda, and looking at their relevance for education for the 21st century. And I think that it is quite unusual, to sort of really be interested in such Asian thinkers, even in leading academic institutions such as University of London. But I think what one really, what is very sort of encouraging is that we see more and more research, undergrad, master's, PhD, coming out that are looking at marginalized communities and perspectives and how to bring those into mainstream education. So I'm really sort of interested in that. So my point on the need for contextual studies is that it is helpful to understand, not just when we get into Soka studies in education, not just, okay, so what did Dr. Ikeda say, or what did Mr. Makiguchi say, but what is the context in which they developed their ideas? What were their creative modes of thinking, and their creativity and their courage? And how can we learn from that creativity and courage that is applicable to our time? I think it's that departure in our learning that is possible through a comparative and contextual studies. So, I can really see the importance of comparative studies now, for Soka education. So, I also want to give some examples as I sort of explore this field of comparative studies in Soka education. When we look at the Dewey-Soka dialogue, so I borrow from this dialogue between Dr. Ikeda and the Dewey scholars, Jim Garrison and Larry Hickman. It's published in a book. When we read this book and when we sort of, introspect based on this dialogue that they had, we can understand the term value creation as growth and character, through their discussions. So when I also look at the notion of value creation in the dialogues, let's say between Dr. Radhakrishnan, the Indian Gandhian scholar, and Dr. Ikeda, I see how value creation is interpreted as this non-dualistic philosophy. So depending on who one is having a conversation with, right? Or where we are looking to apply the concept of value creation, the understanding of value creation starts to develop new meaning. And so this is why I feel the importance of comparative and contextual studies, that it's not just that there is a single definition of what is meant by value creation, but how through the dialogue within our own particularities, where we are situated, we can understand new meanings to the term value creation that is applicable for ourselves, our students, our communities, and so on and so forth. So in my work, I use value creation as a lens. So specifically in a recently published article, I compare, the notion of value creation as non-dualistic philosophy that, talks about the inextricable link between self and others. And when I look at, value creation as a lens, so you can imagine that, I'm holding this lens and I'm trying to look, for what are very similar non-dualistic philosophies that exist. And in my case, the Asian diasporas. And I find that there are many schools in India that have been value creating in the way that they also look at the inextricable link between self and others. So value creation becomes like a lens with which we can explore similar others, schools and philosophies that focus on same types of priorities. So my, moving on, my second suggestion for this field is that, how can we look at the education for sustainable development and global citizenship initiatives, led by UNESCO, using a value creating lens, But before I discuss my thoughts related to the fields of education for sustainable development and global citizenship in the second part of my presentation, let me share something from my own teaching. I often end, in my teaching, I end with this Buddhist parable to explain an important lesson from a study of Soka perspectives. So the story is called The Jewel Hidden in the Robe, and the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there lived a man whose friend was a rich public servant. One day, the man visited his friend, who entertained him with food and wine. The man fell asleep. The rich friend, however, needed to set out on an urgent business trip. The friend had wanted to give the man a priceless jewel which had a mystic power to fulfill any desire. But the man was fast asleep. So the friend sewed the gem into the hem of the sleeping man's robe. The man awoke to find his friend gone, unaware of the jewel his friend had given him. Before long, the man happened to sink into poverty, wandered through many countries, experiencing many hardships. After a long time, now reduced to a state of sheer penury, he met his old rich friend. The friend, surprised at his condition, told him about the gift he had given, and the man learned for the first time that he had possessed the priceless jewel all along. This allegory reminds us of the vast inner potential that exists within ourselves and others. For education, it means paying attention not just to the knowledge content in classroom teaching, but also giving adequate attention to the institution's untaught curriculum or the school ethos that can bring out the pupils' innate abilities and strengths so that learners can create value with their own efforts. So moving on, the Delors report titled Learning the Treasure Within, published by UNESCO in 1996, proposed an integrated vision for education. The 4 pillars of learning described in this report are learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. This report continues to inspire thinking on education worldwide and has been critically revisited several times for fresh insights into ways of challenging education for cognitive, behavioral, and the socio-emotional dimensions of learning. So I would like to focus here on 2 aspects, of the treasure within, as represented in the Delors report. The first aspect is that the treasure lies within human beings, the abilities and aptitudes that can enhance social and self-actualization. The second is the value of learning itself as the treasure, which has been championed as the right of each child by activists such as the Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai. Considering the second aspect, of viewing education as a treasure, the broader emphasis is on developing societies that value and support the needs of education. So what are some of the challenges, that we face, some of the global challenges, and how can we develop a more global education while also addressing issues of sustainability? So some urgent concerns for education in the 21st century, of course, we all know this, these challenges that we all face are climate change, migration due to strife for climate conditions, and the politics of narrow nationalisms. And of course, many communities are facing that, at the forefront of facing these calamities. As a response to some of these issues, in September 2015, the United Nations adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals with active participation by UNESCO. Of these goals, Goal 4 aims at providing equitable and lifelong learning, and quality education. So within Goal 4, Target 4.7 addresses education for sustainable development and global citizenship education to foster global citizens who would meet the world's current challenges. So in this final part of my presentation today, I bring together the discussions related to both fields, to the field of SOCA or value creating education, and education for sustainable development or global citizenship. So I bring together my discussions related to both fields and share some reflections from my work on value creating global citizenship education. So what is the basic, premise of my work? It is that a shift in paradigm and perspectives can enhance praxis, you know. So depending on what perspective we have, the practice of education will start to change, of course. One of the proposals that I make is to shift the emphasis, the current emphasis in education worldwide, from a neoliberal paradigm, very sort of capitalistic, sort of profit-oriented education, to a value-creating paradigm. I think it's so important to reflect on what is our definition of global citizenship education, So as scholarly work suggests, depending on what definition, we choose, and I know global citizenship is is part of the agenda of this center as well. And so, I'd urge to maybe come to a discussion as to, and it would be interesting to sort of investigate, to look at what are people's understanding of the term global citizenship. Because as recent scholarly, work suggests, depending on what definition of global citizenship we adopt, the definitions and models in terms of student outcomes of global citizenship education will start to change. Um, so this is how I use sort of a value creating approach to examine education for global citizenship. So the definition I use is a value creating approach to global citizenship. The focus of my work is to examine, so what are the underlying paradigm and perspectives, within education for global citizenship and sustainable development. So for example, I situate my studies within this wide-ranging scholarship that challenges the Western-dominated agendas and the underlying Western worldview in global citizenship education. And I propose value creating global citizenship education as a pedagogical approach that I have developed from a study of less widely known perspectives. So, several scholars have launched a critique of this, neoliberal, sort of very capitalist paradigm and influence on education, of course. And in this context, I argue that a value creating approach, specifically for the three domains of learning as outlined for the practice of education by UNESCO, could enhance education for global citizenship in the following way. So, when we look at knowledge, there is a lot of emphasis on critical skills. And I think that's great. But also within the knowledge, that we acquire, can we also put an emphasis on dialogic modes of thinking? So that's something a value-creating approach would provide. Then within the socio-emotional domain of learning, there is again a lot of emphasis by UNESCO and within education to have empathy for the other person. But can we move beyond empathy to developing friendship and compassion as a key goal of education? And again, using a value creating approach, can we move beyond charity and advocacy, sort of reaching out to people who are less better off than us, to really becoming contributive citizens, whose innate life disposition is that of contributing to self and others, not just through education, but wherever we are, in our local communities, in our daily life. So these are some of the shifts I think that can take place if we use a value creating approach. So value creating global citizenship education as a pedagogical approach is one that advances learning for sustainable development based on an integrated view of life. It engages with the values, interests, and beliefs of learners and is founded on a trust in the learner's capacity to create value and meaning for self and others. So there are 6 themes for the practice of value creating global citizenship education. The first is a sense of interdependence, common humanity, and a global outlook. How can we promote more sort of sense of interdependence as a common humanity and enable students to have a global outlook? The second is to generate an awareness of climate change as planetary citizens, not just for students, but for us, as teachers, scholars, practitioners. And how can we all, develop a bigger commitment to reflective, dialogic, and transformative learning, as well as a commitment to sustainable development through intercultural perspectives, learning from different views, such as Soka, but also, from Sub-Saharan Africa, Ubuntu, or from Latin America, Bon Vivir, how can we integrate such diverse forms of knowledge into our learning, teaching, and daily life? And can we really develop a belief in the value creating capacity for self and social actualization that exists within each one of us? And finally, through educating for global citizenship, can we develop an understanding of peace and nonviolence as being central to the human rights agendas? So I won't go into the details of these themes because of the limitations of time today, but what they do, as I mentioned earlier, what these themes do is to really, challenge some of the knowledge-based assumptions, epistemic assumptions, within the current practice of education for sustainable development and global citizenship, and offer suggestions for practice. So, for example, as mentioned, several scholars have argued that there is this neoliberal approach, and one of the critiques of education, which is informed by a neoliberal paradigm, is that while maintaining its focus on and giving agency to the individual human beings, education for global citizenship can sometimes get trapped in promoting individualism. And so, in this context, I argue that a value creating paradigm can have a substantive role in nurturing individuals who can lead contributive lives for the welfare of self and others. So, to summarize my presentation so far, value creating global citizenship education brings in certain non-Western perspectives into the discourse on education for sustainable development and global citizenship. This approach takes SOCA or value creation as the focal point of inquiry, but I also locate commonalities with other perspectives, like I mentioned, Ubuntu, Bunvivir, as well as scholars such as John Dewey. And from the African continent, I pick up, sort of get influenced by thinkers such as Wangari Maathai. And one of the lessons, when we look at Wangari Maathai and the Green Belt movement in Africa, one of the, sort of lessons from these movements is that how can we place an emphasis on the human personal dimension of education? I won't go again into the details of this because, we're coming to a close, but, I have in my 2020 book, I developed these concepts, through my work that really sort of digs deep into the practice of value creating education. And, I think just sort of to recap, we can integrate value creating education in a very specific way within learning to know, integrate conversations on earth-centered perspectives, learning to be. We can look at alternative perspectives such as Ubuntu, Bunvivir, Soka, as different ways of viewing self, others, nature, universe. This is also very much plausible and possible in our efforts. Learning to do, we could sort of really look at what a values-based approach means in addition to developing a critical approach in taking action for climate justice and social justice. and learning to live together, with an agenda of leaving no one behind. So thank you so much for your patience to listen to my talk over Zoom. I know it's not easy. Here is my QR code to my blog and my email address. Please feel free to write to me. I'd very much love to support your ongoing work as you move forward, from your studies into further studies, or if you decide to, get into the world as practitioners at any stage of your life. If I can support you, I'd be very, very, very humble. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Namrata. It was universal, holistic to the core, I think we can start a nice reflection.
I'm very happy I pushed the recording button for this one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know it was very content heavy. So
so sorry. I was wondering what that is.
Thank you, Namrata. It was very clear, very articulate.
I was wondering, sorry about that. I didn't stop the recording there. I was wondering what, why I'm hearing multiple noises. Sorry, I didn't stop the recording there. I just stopped screen sharing. Sorry, Vincent, over to you.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Namrata. It was, I say, a universal perspective, a very holistic and strong perspective, And I have a first question, maybe, I don't know. We have two philosophers with us, We have Noémie and Jérémy. And just a little question for them. I don't know if you can bring a convincing answer to that, but how did you relate the kind of study that we are doing in philosophy with the perspective that Namrata exposed recently, How did you relate and when you study philosophy, it's an existential question all the time, And how can you relate to that, to the perspective, to the universal and holistic perspective that Namrata just teach with this presentation? Maybe Jérémy or Noémie, if you are not too embarrassed by my question.
I can go first. Does everybody hear me correctly? Good. Yeah. Good.
It's okay. It's okay.
Good. So so the principle of education isn't just learning. It isn't about knowledge. It is a big part of it, as you have shown, Madame Namrata. But I think the principle of education it goes into ethics, about how to be a good person, but not also to be a good person for yourself, but your community and everyone else. And so in philosophy, we see one of the first philosophers to think about the good life would be Socrates, and even before that, there was Democritus, who talked about atoms and the emptiness, but he also talked about an ethical side of his philosophy. And so the whole presentation for me isn't about education, isn't about just learning and at school, and it's about how to live well and how to build character and virtue, which is an old word of saying to be a good person. And so those are my thoughts. So thank you for the presentation. As usual, good stuff.
Thank you so much, Jérémy.
Noémie.
Yeah, I think Jérémy, like he said, it was a very important concept in ancient philosophy, the idea of education, learning, and virtue. And I think it's something, it's come back a little bit with some person. I have a class this winter, or it's Habermas, or it's the link between knowledge and faith. So I think it's we see it come back in another way, and how knowledge is always we're attached to something more than just knowing something, or just pure knowledge. You need something else, and you need to link it to something else. So yeah, I think it's something interesting in philosophy too.
Thank you so much.
Ebed, maybe. I think you will have a precise idea about that, If you can, Ebed, is it possible to see Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Namrata. Well, I'm actually in a bus now, but I'm pretty sure that in a few minutes I'll be able to say a few words. So just give me a few minutes. Let's say about 5 to 6 minutes. All right.
No problem. Travel safely.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm. He left us? Ahmed is flying away.
No, I'm still with you guys, but I'm in a bus, so I won't be able to express myself pretty well. But in a few minutes, I'll actually join. All right.
If no one has any questions, I actually have two pertaining to the presentation and the reading we had to do for this meeting. If that's okay with everyone here.
Yeah, for sure.
Sounds great.
Good. And so, if you may, if you could go back to your presentation, with the bubbles of the education of global citizenship and education, there was one of the bubbles that specified the interconnectedness of everything. And if I'm not mistaken, that pertains to the Soka root of Nietzschean Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken, about the myoho, like the energy of everyone has the same amount of energy, and even cats, dogs, we all have the same amount of energy, and it's just the environment. You're part of the environment, and if I'm not mistaken, Madame Namrata, if that has anything to do with the Soko root of this concept, it has to do with the Buddhism aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out bubble. What was the bubble? I mean, was it the framework for value creating education?
It was one main circle with other circles
yes,
connected to
yes.
it with
Okay.
different aspects of the education.
Perfect. Okay. So let me just navigate. I should have also pulled up my PowerPoint presentation from the time that I had done this. That would have been easier. But let's very quickly come.
If not, it's
No,
not.
no, it's absolutely fine. I got it. Just a second. So now I'm going to screen share. Is this the one you were referring to?
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep, yeah. It's the top one, a sense of interdependence, common humanity, and a global outlook. And
Okay.
so, my intuition was that this was the Buddhist aspect of the Soka education, which specifies the interconnectedness of all life, and we all participate in the life because we all have like this energy. I've just started doing my readings on Daishin and Nichiren, so I'm not an expert on this at all. So I was just if you could confirm or maybe direct me to the right intuition, but I thought it was probably at the root of this concept.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great question. So basically, value creating global citizenship education is a pedagogical framework that I developed from a study of value creating education. And as we know that, value creating education is developed by Dr. Daisaku Ikeda. And he talks about value creating education or Soka education, more specifically. Makiguchi Makiguchi has developed a pedagogical work called Value Creating Pedagogy, or Soka Kyoiku Gaku Taike. And so in the chapter 2 of the 2018 book, which we read for today, I talk a little bit about the shift from, Mr. Makiguchi and his work on value creating pedagogy to Dr. Ikeda and his notion of value creating education, So Ikeda's work borrows from Makiguchi's work, but is also influenced by, Mahayana Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism. And so in sort of, developing this framework, in my case, very much of Ikeda's understandings of, what you had said earlier about, what constitutes as a good life, what is the sort of, what is the aim of life, and then from that, what is the aim of education, Ikeda's understanding of that is, of course, heavily influenced by Buddhism, and that, of course, then influences my work. But I also, I'm interested in looking at the field of global citizenship education. And within the field, what are the debates that have to do with values-based perspectives? And I take those debates into consideration, when I am sort of working on this pedagogical framework. So the values that I engage with are, of course, to do with the Soka values, but they also have to do with universal values that inform global education. That comes, for example, from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a global framework. It also comes from the Earth Charter, which is another sort of global ethical framework, that underpins global citizenship education. And so you're right that it is, Buddhist ethics that inform my work, but it is also these universal values as encapsulated in some of these universal documents. So I'll just stop sharing so I can see you more personal this way. I don't know if that sort of responds to your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the explanation. If I could, another question, and after I'll let everyone else ask their or give their impressions on the presentation. But my second question was about the reading. And towards the end of the chapter, you talk about how Gandhi's teachings and his philosophy of education was 30 years after his death became like hijacked by the state, and some socialist and communist groups disavowed his way of thinking because it was like I said, hijacked by the state, and you didn't really like go too much into it because it wasn't the primary thematic of the chapter, but you don't really go into it. But I think it's maybe because I don't know if Gandhi disavowed completely the caste system. I think he was against the treatment of the untouchables, but he never disavowed completely the caste system. I think, and is that why the communist or more radical groups said that Gandhi didn't go far enough? Or so, yeah.
Thank you so much. It's such an amazing question, honestly. And you've read so much as well. So that's true. I mean, so in my 2008 book, I develop, this comparative study between Makiguchi and Gandhi in a much more substantive way. And I engage with, some of what you had just mentioned. So B.R. Ambedkar, was a person from one of the political, leaders of India, who also helped frame the Indian Constitution. And Ambedkar was from the Dalit class, or the lower caste in India. And he sort of had this, sort of notion of the Dalits need more protection. And while Gandhi was, very much for promoting equity, not just equality, but also notions of equity across race, caste, class, and other sort of divisions within society. I think there are various instances in which Gandhi has sort of not made himself very clear. And that definitely does contribute to the lack of appreciation that he received, very soon after his death from the lower caste, people. But I think that also, brings, to the discussion something really important for those of us who are interested in Soka studies in education. And that is, the importance of knowing that thinkers such as Gandhi and Dr. Ikeda, when they are alive and they are, working in the mainstream society or in education, we are very much enthused by their radicality and, and what they stand to serve and promote. But soon after their death, or their passing away, and I say this, at this time when Dr. Ikeda has, passed away just a few months ago, that unless a historical study truly understands the creativity, that these thinkers exposed, through their actions and what they really stood for, unless such historical contextual studies are promoted, there will be a good chance that thinkers such as Gandhi and maybe Ikeda at a later time are not understood in the way that they should be for their creativity, for their radicality, for them being these active citizens, and that's why I'm so kind of enthusiastic and enthused, about promoting the philosophy in a very clear historical, educational, and political manner. So thank you for that great question.
Thank you very much. Very nuanced answer. I love it. Thank you.
I had to draw it back to our, topic of general interest, but I would love to talk to you more about Dr. Ambedkar.
Namrata, can you comment a little bit? You wrote in page 20 on this chapter, something very clear. According to with value-creating pedagogy, individual happiness is a state in which one lives contributively, that is through creating value for individual benefit as well as the good of the society. How can we develop on that, the link between the individual and society? It relates to the concept of human revolution, someone who develop himself, who develop his humanity and who spread very naturally this humanity in all his environment. It relates to a concept of Buddhist échauffournie, and separability of the people and his environment. And how can we grasp that really deeply? Because it's one of the core value of value-creating pedagogy.
Thank you so much, Vince. That's such a key question. I think there's so much work that still remains to be done for us who are interested in SOCA studies in education, primarily because I think, first of all, in terms of the ethos of the SOCA schools and universities, much more work needs to be done to be able to encapsulate how students understand, just through being immersed within the ethos of these SOCA institutions, how they understand Ikeda's vision of living a contributive life, for something bigger than just our own interest, for something bigger than just, having education that gives us a job, so the definition of education or the aims of education within a neoliberal framework. How do we shift from that to a contributive framework? I think SOCA schools and universities, the ethos needs to be studied in much better way, because at the end of the day, I think as a scholar, I would say as much as, the knowledge is important, perhaps in some ways, the ethos is even more important in enabling students to live contributively, But second, I think we talked about Socrates, right? Jeremy mentioned Socrates. And so the concept of dialogic learning, that Dr. Ikeda promotes, that Socrates, Martin Buber, and other scholars, have sort of written about extensively. The concept of dialogue as well within education is so important. And here, I think, how can we frame the curriculum in a way that is dialogic? So to learn from various ways of living, acting, being that have informed various groups of people worldwide and led to sustainable communities. So to live contributively, we need to also move beyond the Western frameworks to understand what does live contributively mean within Ubuntu framework, not just SOCA framework, but Ubuntu framework, Bun Vivir from Latin America. Within that framework, what does it mean to live contributively for others and oneself? So I think the learning, the knowledge also has to be non-centric. So we draw from these examples that students and those of us who are working in education are exposed to much more intensely. And of course, within assessment, I think practices as well, and that is the most challenging part. But how can learning objectives within curriculum and also the assessments allow for much more of a collaborative learning to take place within classrooms and outside. And I think there's just so much that needs to be done when we try to reimagine curriculum, reimagine assessments and such frameworks, from a value creating perspective, to really allow the entire process of education to focus on a contributive life, then the current aims of education, which is educating for profit. So that's a long answer again.
So we welcome Mr. Anthony, who is not with us with the picture, but and Ebed, so the land in his home. I think they will be able to talk about what the question that we were. You follow a little bit, Ebed. You are not.
Yes. Well, sorry for the disturbance. Thank you so much, Namrata, for this inspiring and very generous presentation. So I was in the bus, so actually I was not able to speak to intervene. But I don't really have a question, but I think the presentation really strengthened my conviction, also my ideas when it comes to value creating education for Haiti. And I'm actually looking forward to a master's degree in educational leadership and societal change to see how I'll possibly be able to use that philosophy in Haiti. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Fantastic. It's good to see you again, Ebed. So good to
Thank
see
you. Good to see you too.
Ebed is leaving for Soka University of America quite fast,
I gathered. That's Jay's course, right? That's Jay's master's program.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
I spoke to one of the classes held by Professor Heto at Pakwesi at Soka University. We did a session, I think it was earlier this year. Yes.
Anthony, are you with us? Anthony, can you open your camera? Did you hear me?
He says soon, I think.
Okay. So there is another intervention about what we talk about since the beginning was really interesting. So how can we relate? It's a holistic perspective. It's the core of soccer education is a real holistic vision of the world, And it seems to me, maybe you're not familiar with that, Namrata, I don't know. There is a French scholar who wrote The Seven Knowledge for Education of Future. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's documented by UNESCO. It was translated in English, and it was published in 2000 at the turn of the millennium. And Edgar Morin, which is the name of this man, and The Seven Knowledge of the Education of Future, it's just, each time that I read this text, I was thinking it was how, if Dr. Morin could have met Dr. Ikeda, they would have a wonderful dialogue between him and, because the seven knowledge of the education of future is really an holistic perspective with that, and it can relate directly with the picture that you bring in one moment, the holistic picture, the center. And it's interesting to know that the more and more you have perspective in a vision of a holistic vision for the future of education, it's something we stick in roots, because we understand anthropology, that there are some anthropology of globalization when you find this kind of works, by, I don't know if you know him, the anthropologist Constantin von Barlowen, another author about that. And it can relate directly, and I think the picture that you bring at the end that we comment that Jeremy comment was really the core of that. What we can relate on that, understand, have a clear picture of that, and work, because it's not by chance that you put at the center of value creating education, and it irradiates in all the dimensions, That's the core. And I think it's really, really interesting to realize that,
Thank you.
So, Ebeth, can you talk a little bit about, because nobody is really aware, completely aware about your project in Haiti, and how do you really, because you start to have a really good understanding about what is value creating education, and you intend in the future, you intend to start something really, really interesting in that field. If you can talk a little bit about that, would be nice.
Well, I'll be very brief because I have my two sons, they're kind of like getting ready to sleep. But well, the idea is my project is to see how possible I could in the future implement the value creating education in Haiti. Well, it's not going to be a copy paste, model, but I'll see. Well, the idea is to figure out what are the part I could use to actually change things, change the way education is actually being constructed in Haiti. But to do that, I'll have to be in close contact or relationship with the government because when it comes to education, it's not something that an individual could actually implement by himself, but it has to be in connection or in collaboration with the government. That's the purpose of doing a master's degree in educational leadership and societal change in Atsuka University in California. And as I said, it is not going to be a copy-paste model, but I'll try to use that model to strengthen education in Haiti and then see different other models around the world. For instance, the Finnish education system, which is a good system, which I believe I could also use to change the way education is actually being done in Haiti. So basically even before I complete my master's degree at Atsuka University, I'll try to start building a network of schools in Haiti or start with existing school system in Haiti and then try to implement that the Makiguchi pedagogy in Haiti. So that's basically what I'm actually intended to do in the future.
That's amazing.
You
Yeah.
have to, and with a really strong determination because it will be a great task, definitely, in a very difficult context.
Well, I think it's something that would actually help Haiti a lot because I don't know if some of you know about it, but there's lots of violence now in Haiti. Violence is everywhere in Haiti. Haiti is actually aroused by violence and political instability and stuff like that. So, I believe the best thing we could do is actually educate the people. When it comes to value creating education, it's not only going to be for the children or young men and women, but it would also include, the adults, because I believe that everyone in Haiti should be educated. As myself, I'm re-educating myself. So I think when it comes to education, it's going to be for everyone. So everyone needs to be part of it if we really want to have a radical change in Haiti.
It's amazing.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm gonna have to leave because my two sons, I have to take them to bed. But I really appreciate to have you for this presentation. And I'm actually looking forward for your help as well. Maybe you never know, you could actually become my director for my thesis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ebeth, for joining. I really look forward to continuing our conversations.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ebeth. Thank you very much.
Merci, Dr. Fogg. On se parlera bientôt. Bye-bye.
D'accord, bye-bye. And now we have on the screen, we have Anthony who just arrived some time ago. Did you follow the conversation that we had?
I'm sorry, I couldn't. I really just got caught up in work and I ran all the way home. Now I was just like, I opened the computer. I had my headphones on, but I was setting myself up so I could open my camera and not look all messed up a little bit. So I followed ever since I joined at 8. So I apologize for this inconvenience.
No, it's a company, but you read the chapter 2 of the books of Namrata, huh?
Yes.
And do you have some intervention about that? Some kind of question, reflection about that?
I'll just open up the notes that I took about this chapter. I found it very interesting. I didn't think there were so many uh, links between Ikeda, or maybe more is it more Ikeda or Makiguchi, and Gandhi. Just put it back.
So while Anthony is looking at that, Vincent, you said the students are preparing to go to Japan. Is the whole group going to Japan? Oh, wow.
Yeah, there will be
No,
there in the second part of May.
not
You know.
everyone.
We don't, but we will spend a week there, and I'm sure that it will be very valuable, you know, because we have a new team, you know, so some people who already came last time and some new, and we will be able to intertwine with the SOCA students first. And then it was very fruitful last time. It was really something, a great experience. And I hope that we can pursue on this way, because it's when you have a first-hand experience of soccer education, is when you arrive in the campus, you feel a spirit, you know, particularly if you connect with the soccer students. And I really hope that it will be as fruitful this time that it was last in fall 2022. And voila. And it will be nice one time, and Namrata, if you can be with us on the camp.
Yes, I would love that. I would love for that.
If there is,
Felicia, did you say you're not going?
pardon?
No, I think, go ahead.
No, I can't go this year because I am doing my well, I gotta be available for school until May 27th, so I can't go this year.
Next time.
Yeah, sometimes. And so I hope that we can really get a center at Laval. We can reply this experience, and each year will be really because there are already students who are willing to discover, and not just going to Japan. That one thing which is really attractive for sure, but be able already to study what soccer education is, and then be able to do some research around the Ikeda Center that we opened at Laval, and he's working on this field, and we can develop that on the future year. Definitely. I see some.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so I don't know, something else to say.
Well, I just finished reviewing my notes, and well, it's not that much of a question. It's more like of a statement. I was sort of blown away with the concept of satyagraha. Am I pronouncing this right? And it ties with the Ningen Kyoku, a human revolution, the equivalence between them two, and also the fact that, well, in the case of Gandhi, he was definitely a political figure, whereas Makiguchi was a teacher, and he had to struggle a lot because he was not a graduate teacher, he was a high school teacher. And of course, the way their stories went is completely different because he ended up in jail and he died there, whereas Gandhi became much more of a not just a political figure, but also a very popular figure. Where this is where you mentioned that Ikeda looks a little bit more like Gandhi because he as well was also very involved in politics, and that's why he has such an impact. And I found it somehow or somewhat a little bit sad that Makiguchi, in a sense, because of his predicament, I feel like he didn't have as much of an impact as he could have, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is historically true. Makiguchi deserved much more attention, you know, in his time. But, you know, it's, of course, as we know, you know, because of his successors, that he's been able to gain the recognition that he very much deserved on his own merit during his lifetime. But in this chapter I mentioned as well, like Kumagaya, through his research, finds that in the 1971, report of the educators of that time, Makiguchi is missing, in the Japanese report. So Makiguchi is missing in that sort of handbook of educators, that was published in 1971 of that time period. So, so to me, Ikeda and Gandhi are educators when we understand education in the broader sense of the term, beyond schooling, To me, they are educators in that sense. And of course, both Ikeda and Makiguchi also were challenging the politics of the day, as Gandhi. But the dictatorial regime that Makiguchi was up against was much more brutal in that sense. Of course, the British Raj as well, had its own set of brutalities. But in some ways, they were politically a little bit more astute to know that they can't get rid of Gandhi so easily. Whereas the Japanese government at that time, were brutal to an extent that they would just take someone, throw the person into prison. And the brutalities of the Japanese government in parts of Asia was much more severe in some ways than the British Raj, So you have to see sort of what they were up against, including their own context.
And yet they came up with very similar ideas in very different contexts. That's also something very noticeable.
You're so right. You're so right. Absolutely. The notion of truth actually is so interesting, because the notion of truth is very close to what the Soka progenitors sort of uphold, and Gandhi was trying to propagate through the satyagraha. Satya means truth, and agraha means resistance. So it's resistance based on fighting for truth or upholding truth. And that word satya is comes also from the understanding of the law of life, or which Nichiren Buddhists call the law of cause and effect. So it's the same understanding of dharma, that's why one of the things I mentioned in the presentation was using value creation as a lens to be able to. So when I used value creation as a lens to understand Indian education and the alternative, forms of education within India, I was able to see that this understanding of truth that Makiguchi and Ikeda are talking about, the based on law of cause and effect, this same understanding of dharma and satya is what informed Gandhi and other educators like Sri Aurobindo and Krishnamurti. And then the schools that are in the lineage of these thinkers in India are very similar in their frameworks to the Soka schools in terms of the holistic understanding of education that they promote. So it's really sort of comes back to using value creation, the notion of Soka as a lens, right? I mean, when I use a lens, I'll be able to see things differently. So when we use a lens like Soka to understand the debates for global citizenship education, you come to very different conclusions than if you use a lens in which you're using, let's say, critical lens, like Vanessa Andriotti does in her work. So when you look at education for global citizenship through a critical lens, you get different results. When you look at it through value creating lens, you get different set of results. But we are so early in that research, and work, that even to articulate, and this is the impact of colonization, that we've lost the vocabulary, the tools to observe, articulate, analyze, and implement, indigenous thinking. We just don't have it. So I'm always struggling to explain, what this means and what I'm observing in ways that are such, that are by tools that are provided to me only by Western educators through the learning experience in Japan, in India, here in the US, I've only sort of looked at education through the lens of Western educators. So we've got a lot of work to do, all of us.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned at some point that there was a time where Japanese people used to kind of value more the ideas that were coming from Western, such as the US, and so that also must have had an impact in Japan as well.
Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Sorry, what did you say? I wanted to say good night to Maxine. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to respond to that in real time. Sorry, Anthony, could you rephrase your question again? Sorry, just pose the
Yeah,
question again,
no,
please. I'm
no
so
problem.
sorry.
It's just that what you just mentioned about like how a huge part of knowledge was lost through colonization. That made me think of one passage in your text when you mentioned that through a certain period of time, Japanese people were uh, giving more value to ideas that were coming from Westerners than their own Japanese like counterparts. So I guess that there were also a lot of knowledge that was lost because of that, or just not recognized.
Absolutely true. I mean, so this is the work done by, Kumagaya and Saito and others, who I had the, privilege of working with as a master's student when I was in Japan. And they've, actually looked at the original text of Mr. Makiguchi's ideas, and they, of course, have a very deep understanding of the Japanese history, educational history. And they've been able to identify in a much more substantive way the influence at that time period of Western authors, particularly from Germany, and other parts of Western Europe, that made sort of that was so instrumental in educators in Makiguchi's time period to just use those theories without really thinking as to what is applicable and more relatable, or what is applicable to the particularities of the learners within their own context. But Makiguchi wasn't like these other thinkers and educators of his time in Japan. He wanted to build a theory of education that starts from practice, and that practice was rooted in his own teaching within classrooms in Japan. So yes, you're absolutely right. Makiguchi was challenging that in his time period. And yet, if he had a longer life, maybe he would have been able to tell us exactly how to, use the value creating pedagogy in a much more clear way.
Mhm. So, so. Maybe something else? If we don't want to keep you too late, Namrata. We are more than 1 hour that we are together. Yeah, a little bit more than that. So I don't know if there is any other intervention, something. Maybe Jeremy.
Yeah, I can go for another question.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I know that Daisuke Ikeda, he had read John Dewey, I think that's his name, and a little bit of Emerson, if I'm not mistaken. And so for me, which I'm doing my master's on Nietzsche, and so he has quite a very particular theory of education, but he takes from a lot from Emery and Dewey. And so my question for you would be, I know maybe it wouldn't be intuitive to ask this, but Ikeda never got a hold of Nietzsche's works on education, because I think they, creating values and creating new morality as well. I think those are themes that would find maybe their some echo in Ikeda's works, I think. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. So I was just
No,
simple question.
Jeremy, Ikeda has talked about Nietzsche, but I just can't remember where. Of course, Dewey we know, very well, because especially because of this dialogue between the Deweyan scholars, Jim Garrison and Larry Hickman and Dr. Ikeda. So we have that very well documented study. But Ikeda does talk about these other thinkers that you mentioned, and of course Emerson as well. but I can't quite remember where I read this. So, you know.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I'll check that because I didn't know that he actually talked about Nietzsche. So I'll do my research, and next time we meet, I'll for sure give you the references.
I'm going to do a Google search as soon as we hang up. Maybe I'll find something there, you know?
So something else, someone else, maybe. So, do we have to close this evening? It seems it look like. And if it's the case, a great thank you very much, Namrata. Was very, I think, fruitful, lively, and kind of develop the kind of thinking about that. And we have to go deeper, you know, but particularly and when we will have the opportunity at Soka University to engage with Soka students, to have a strong, a deep discussion with them about when they are living some 1 or 2 years on the Soka campus. At the end of the line, what their understanding, what their practice, what their behavior in Soka education, and in this kind of value of creating, and how they influence their life, how they find it very fruitful for develop their personality, their character. I think it will be something really that we have to go deeper, because it's not easy to grab all the aspect and how deep it is to live a life where the creating values, it's something that could be center in your life, at the center of your life. And if we start to think about that, we know how large this reflection could be, you know, and how engaging, how concerning it will be. It's an existential revolution, I would say. If you really understand what the meaning of creating values is, you cope with something which is absolutely existential, holistic, and you could be change definitely. It's not by chance that it is related with the concept of human revolution. And human revolution is something that is really the most deep experience that someone can experience in his life, to know to how to face a human revolution. What's the meaning of a human revolution? What's the meaning of developing a humanistic behavior in this world, and develop for yourself, develop for the other, and understand really that's something absolutely great to do. Definitely, it's a good beginning. I would say it's a good beginning for us, and I hope that we can. Marianne, is Marianne? Do you have something to say? Maybe.
No, no particularly. I think we covered like a lot of subject in that discussion. It was really interesting, and like we covered like new subject that it's been a while since we talked about. So it was really interesting. So thanks a lot to take the time to talk with us. It's really appreciated from everyone.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And I really look forward to continuing these discussions because, you know, I learn a lot every time we interact with each other, because there's not just this one way of understanding Dr. Ikeda's work, you know, and even Gandhi's and other thinkers that I'm interested in, but not just one way of understanding. And just through these dialogues, you know, we get to think about so many things. And I have my notes here that I'm going to be looking at again. And, you know, deeply introspecting on what Vincent said about the notion of human revolution, you know, which definitely requires resilience. You know, to me, human revolution, the number one quality is resilience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And so I think we put the final point tonight. Maybe. Namrata, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
We will report to you after our
Yes,
session.
yes, have a great trip. I'll really be, you
You
know,
will have some
yeah,
echoes.
yes, I'll be thinking of you all, and I wish you all a safe journey, fantastic, life-changing opportunity. And for those of you who can't go, you know, I'm sure there will be opportunities in the very near future. So
Thank you very much, Namrata. So thank you to everyone, because I think it was already, we spent a wonderful moment together. And we see the Jeremy. So let's say that let's keep in touch, Namrata, and to the next opportunity, you know.
Awesome. Looking forward.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Thank
Merci
you.
beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Thank
Again,
you.
Thank you.
sorry for joining late.
No, no problem at all. Thank you so much for joining, Anthony. Take good care of yourself.
You as well.
Thank you.